Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name's Jake, and today we're going to be looking at the Tormentors from the new Emperor's Children box set, Champions of Slaanesh. Now there's quite a few troops in this box, tons and tons of infantry here. If you've ever done any kind of commission painting, you know that infantry tends to be the bane of any commission painter's existence. They're detail heavy, they're tedious, there's a bunch of them, right? And they are stock standard troops, which means that everybody needs them. You can request a higher price from that as an exchange, but it still takes up a ton of time. When me and my buddy are trying to figure out a way to paint these guys up in a way that is time efficient, but they still look good so people get a good product for what they're paying for, we're trying to find how to get that best balance of quality and time, what methods can be used, with special tips and tricks, how to treat the different colors. This video covers my exploration of how that can be done with these new Emperor's Children. Some immediate obstacles facing us when we're looking at this is the Emperor's Children, at least as they've done on the box art, they're broken up into two different primary colors for the armor. Splitting colors on armor is immediately a huge time increase because you can't just airbrush the whole one main color on the armor and then just fill in the details after and you're done. No. You gotta split them up, and if it's any kind of difficult or sensitive color, then you've got more time, more issues. You gotta work more carefully around each of the colors. I'm hoping to get a second squad to play with here in a little bit now that I've painted up this first one. From painting this first one, as you'll see in the video, there's a lot of areas where I had to play around with how I wanted to do the pink, the best method for the black, what order to do things in. Having done this first group, I now have a pretty good idea in my mind of how I would do a second group, and I'm excited to see if I can indeed get a second group done faster at a similar level of quality by making some changes and tweaks to the steps and how I approach and consider certain details. Alright, so let's get right into it. Here you're looking at one of the Tormentor Sergeants. Here's another one. This is the only one that has a bear head on it. These are almost exactly how the minis came to me originally. They were already primed in black. The only thing I had to do was glue them to the bases and do my usual basing method with sand, PVA glue, and then locking it all down with ultra thin super glue for a nice tight seal that will not crumb away. One thing I did want to try working with this time was Doomfire Magenta. This is one of the newer Citadel contrast colors. It's one of those ones that really doesn't have a whole lot of contrast, not a lot of distance from its brightest to its lightest. I'm going to be trying this alongside one of my favorites, Fluorescent Pink by Golden. Poppy, UV reactive bubblegum pink paint, and I want to see if I can find a balance between these two or if one's going to be better than the other. But my thought first is I'm going to try the Doomfire Magenta just by itself, and I'm going to be doing it over a sort of slap chop, undercoated value sort of sketch, and I'm going to be using some stippling and dry brushing for this, starting of course with bright neutral gray, one of my favorites. This gets great coverage even over solid black, so it seems to me to be the natural choice to begin with. So here I'm stippling on the bright neutral gray. I'm trying to get those volumetric tones. Just brushing over such a slick primer was not working very well for me. It was just pushing paint around, so stippling was what I had to resort to. And you can see here that I did basically just one half of the mini, the helmet, one shoulder pad, arm, leg, and so I'm going to be doing the magenta over this just to start. You can see putting the magenta over this, immediately it is very poppy, very vibrant. It's a lovely color. I actually really liked this color a lot more than I thought I would putting it on. However, you can see it is very dark. It's not quite that bubblegum pink that we're going for with the box art. If it were my own army I was painting, I would happily use this magenta on my own Emperor's Children. So what you see here is the components of the next mixture that I attempted. I still wanted to go for a contrasty style mixture. I got the Doomfire Magenta, the Fluorescent Pink, and then to dilute it, I got some of the contrast medium from Citadel. I'm going to try mixing these together in one or two different dilutions and see if I can't get something that still gives that fluorescent bubblegum pink pop, but has the nice vibrancy and change of tone that the Doomfire Magenta provides. So here's my second test model. You can see that I could have done a way better job of giving him his value underbrushing, slap chop, whatever you want to call it. But I didn't. It's kind of blocky and chunky and solid white. Well, we're going to go ahead and put it over there anyway. You can see that it does go over the white quite nicely, and it does have that bubblegum pop, but we're not seeing a whole lot of contrast. It's mostly just solid pink for the most part. We're getting tiny bits of shadows and tiny bits of highlight, but it's not quite where we want it to be. But I did decide to go ahead and do a second dilution of this mixture and see if I couldn't get it closer to where I wanted by adding a second layer of dry brushing over this first contrast layer and then doing a even more diluted solution of the magenta over that. So you can see me here stippling on some of that white straight onto the upper reaches of where I already applied the pink. This is messy, didn't go very well, but I tried it just to see if it would work. In reality, doing a speed paint method with this is already a bit much. There's too many steps involved already, but I wanted to see if maybe just having a better base coat to begin with would give me what I was looking for. I was kind of just fooling around at this point, but that's fine. That's all part of the process. You can see here now that even with that second dry brushing coat and then a more diluted solution of the magenta and fluorescent pink over it, there really is not that much of a difference. It just looks like more bubblegum pink with perhaps a slight bit of definition. In short, it's not the amount of difference that I would want to get out of this, certainly not for the time spent. You can see it compared to one that had just the one coat of the magenta mix. There's really not that big of a difference. And there is the Doomfire magenta version next to it. I still honestly really do prefer the look of the Doomfire magenta, but it's not the box art. If it was a personal project, I certainly wouldn't mind that color myself. But since we're trying to get pretty close to the box art, I still wanted to go for that bubblegum sort of pink. Next thing I decided to try was to take this first test Tormentor that I had painted up with the Doomfire magenta and try to do a dry brush over it and then do the fluorescent over that in a sort of glaze and see if that could get us the full range of color that I was hoping we could achieve in a short amount of time. Here you can see me just stippling on the white, same as before, trying to stick to where the volumetric highlights would be. Still kind of messy, but that's okay. If we're going to be glazing over, then it's, we're going to be blending a lot of these different areas together in the end anyways. And you can see I expanded into some of the new spots that I hadn't covered previously. So now I take some of the very lightly diluted fluorescent pink and I start applying it over my dry brushed layer, that pure white over the Doomfire magenta. I think probably I could have done better creating a gradient because now it just looks sort of blocky in terms of going from the magenta in the recesses to straight fluorescent pink. Given more time and cleaner gradient from dark to light, better value undershading, then we might have gotten a better result out of this. But as it stands, the blending, we just don't really have time for it. The colors, I think they don't play together super nice anyways. More time and testing might reveal otherwise, but for now, it just was not panning out the way that I needed to, and I needed to get these guys done with a solution that actually seemed like it was going to work. The next thing that I decided to try was just putting pure fluorescent pink through the airbrush over a standard zenithal highlighting over the black primer. So here you can see what that looks like. I took black primer, did some standard white primer over it from a zenithal spray direction. Then I airbrushed the pink fluorescent straight onto the white parts. I was able to pick out fairly well what areas I wanted to paint versus not with minimal overspray. This, I think, was a turning point to where I felt like this was the direction we were going to go. So here you can see the process by which I achieved this. Airbrush flow improver mixed with that white so it doesn't choke up the needle of our airbrush. Give it a good mix. And then over that black primer, we just give it a spray from the top in typical zenithal fashion. Even so, you can see at points I did extra blasts of white towards some of the most prominent features of the miniature, the shoulders and the head. So then now I've got the fluorescent pink loaded up into my finer tip airbrush, and this really didn't need much dilution at all. I'm applying it to just the areas that I want to be pink for this miniature. Watching for some overspray, but it's not a huge issue. It get covered up later. In fact, you don't want to dilute this too much. You can see that it waters and beads up on some parts of this miniature, so I have to stop and thicken it up with more of the actual fluorescent pink again. Now it's going on at a much better consistency. While this fluorescent is very bright, it's super saturated. In fact, the shadows still apply. The highest highlights are still there. Even in the official box art, there's not a whole lot of contrast on this pink. It's okay. So here's all of the Tormentors with the airbrushing pink. I repainted, resprayed, reprimed all of the original guys I was testing on. Have different randomly chosen segments. You can see the camera even is having trouble dealing with this level of pink. But as soon as I had this step done, I knew that this was the direction I wanted to go. It was fast, it was relatively clean, following other steps that I knew were to come later. Any overspray would be covered up. We were finally on the right track. Next up was the black. This is the second primary color, and for this, I decided to use the contrast mix that Jay from Eons of Battle has shared on his channel before. It is 4 parts Black Legion contrast to 2 parts Leviathan blue contrast to 4 parts of contrast medium, or Lamian medium. So here, my less than ideal camera skills reveal to you that this is going on pretty smooth. I'm getting this all over any of the armor panels that are going to be black, as well as the details that's going to be the gun casings, as well as all the flexible tubing and undersuit for our Space Marine armor, which is way more prominent in these Slaanesh Marines than in any of the other chapters that we've seen. I like this design choice. It harkens back to a lot of the original Emperor's Children art. So I don't agree with every design choice that was made for these Emperor's Children in this new release, but I do agree with that one. So here's the dried result. You can see that it's got a slightly shiny satin finish that helps to establish highlights where we may not have time to put in those highlights ourselves. For a speed job like this, it's a pretty good deal. I think this is a great contrast to that poppy bubblegum pink. This was a bit tedious to do 2 primary colors on different random pieces of the armor, but it's fun, it is chaotic, and if nothing else, we nailed the box art pretty hard. So next up we have the metallics. Here we're going for a darker steel, which was another interesting, slightly unexpected design choice by the box art team. But you know what? I don't hate it. The more I painted this color, the more I liked this choice for their armor. It is a nice contrast to their bright pink colors. Now, normally in the past, we've seen 40k Emperor's Children have gold trim in various amounts, but here I think the steel with just some very small areas of gold works pretty well. So I mixed together the Vallejo True Metal Color Magnesium and Chrome, keeping it a 50-50 mix so that it was still plenty shiny even after we apply wash later down the road. So I'm just going here, and this was by far the most tedious step of the entire process. There's a lot of trim on these guys. With future iterations, I would be looking for areas of trim that I could get away with not painting to keep them the same armor panel color. As I was going through this process, I kept running into issues with the very, very fluid Vallejo True Metal colors flowing where they did not need to be going, and so I mixed in some Iron Hand Steel to give the metallic a little more body so that it stayed where I put it without losing that awesome true mica metallic shine. So then now we've got the detailed areas on some of the specialized guns, the muzzles of the melta guns and the plasma guns. Those are based in just your typical old Rune Lord brass. Now, for shading all of these metals, Targor Raid Shade was one of the first things that came to mind. Looking at the box art, there's a very mauve kind of shade and shadow to how they did their steel, and this was the first color that came to mind. This is a purpley brown shade. It's a wash consistency. As soon as I started applying this, I knew that this was the go-to. This was the wash that we needed to be using. I had considered Drugi Violet previously to get still some of that purple tone, but there's enough purple in this, but there's brown too, and really give that steel trim some very, very lovely character while keeping it tied in with these very poppy pink colors. And so here I just went around and applied it to all the metallics, even the studs on the leather, all of the trim, any of the areas of the backpacks that were painted in the silver, and we're just going to town. Even the Rune Lord brass areas got some of this, and they would be getting highlights later to help further separate them. This wash also is nice for hitting any areas that maybe I might have missed, possibly, potentially, in the trim steps or any of the black coating, or even some pink areas that didn't get what they needed. I even did it around all the single Emperor's Children symbols on all of their left-hand pauldrons. Even Even though these areas would be done in gold later, this helps to create separation from the pink because a contrasting color of the yellow and gold is purple. And so the purple here helps to separate those two materials to the eye. All right, so here we are with all the steel applied and washed, and golly gee, look at that finish. That is a clean, mean coat of steel. That Targor Raid shade goes great over that steel color. It really gives us exactly what we're looking for. These guys are handsome. Now, you'll notice I did miss some parts of the trim. We are going to include these in the next step, which is going to be our gold. So for the gold, I'm going to be mixing rich gold from Pro Acryl with some of this pure metal pigment powder from Green Stuff World, this antique gold. You only need a little bit of this. It goes a long way. Give it a little bit of water and mix it into your base gold paint, and you've got some very real looking gold. It's a very nice, almost brassy gold. We are going to be using this as a highlight color on top of all of those Runelord brass details that we got, but I did all the signs on their little placards. Any of the areas of trim that I happen to miss, we'll just say it's being random and we color it in the gold, as well as all the Emperor's Children symbols. We made sure to get those in gold. That's very important. We also make sure we get any of these Slaaneshi icons. There are 2 in this group of 10. We also got to make sure we get all the sigils on the bolters, the casings of the bolt rounds in the bolter magazines, and we also can't forget the ampules of Eldari Super Skooma on their hips. Now you might be saying, Jake, Skooma is from a different fictional universe. That doesn't make any sense. And my response to that is, you clearly don't know the right warp demons. Consider upgrading your plug. Now for shading all of this gold that we just did, I'm going to be mixing Gore Grunter Fur Contrast with Technical Contrast Medium, diluting it down a little bit so we still get that nice nutty rich color, but without completely knocking out the shine of the gold. So now I'm just going around to all the gold pieces just the same as we did with the steel and adding that wash over any and all gold, keeping to the recesses, adding a little bit extra in any lower areas of the gold, maybe like the sunken parts of the wings on the Emperor's Children symbols, and just making sure we have good clear separation from all the other materials. Next up, we've got the tassels that are all over each of these guys. Some of them have them on their head, some of them have them down around their feet, or they're hanging off the backpacks. I based these in bright pale green from Pro Acryl, still trying to keep at least a little bit of the Zenithal highlight versus shadow. I also use this color to base the eye lenses. And then I went in with a wash of Hex Wraith Flame to fill in all the recesses and give it a nice poppy look. I also did this on all of the eye lenses. Here you can see the final result. It's a little more saturated in the box art, but the tone is correct. It's kind of that green apple candy sort of color. For a short speed paint, this is fine to go with. You can also see that I went ahead and dealt with the eyes on this one exposed head Marine. He got a base coat of titanium white over the eyes, and then I just did a simple little semicircle of black in the corners to simulate both the iris as well as the reflection in the darker part of the eye. This is a simple technique. This is how you can get good looking eyes with little to no effort. You just need a really sharp brush. Next up, we've got all of the leather on these guys. The sergeants have it stretched across their chests. We've got the bare exposed skin on the one Marine. So what I wanted to try and do first was just apply a simple layer of Gilliman flesh and see if that would get us what we wanted straight over the Zenithal primer. This ended up being pretty dark. Gilliman flesh is a pretty dark contrast. I ended up feeling like it needed more Kislev flesh, more actual layered flesh tones in this leather later down the road. All of this led me to the decision that in the future with other Tormentors, I would just be painting this leather black as well. For the same reason, if I ever have the choice to assemble the models that we're going to be selling, then almost always I will be choosing helmets rather than skin. It just takes up so much more time, even though it does look good and skin can be fun to paint like you see me enjoying here, it eats up too much time. Next up are the plasma weapons, and we actually have a pretty good handful in this group of 10, 2 pistols and 2 full rifles. So I wanted to try and use Kroxigor scale contrast paint to see if this gets us a nice decent heavy metal style glow. And I'm going to be basing this with Liquitex titanium white acrylic ink. After getting one base coat with this ink, I went with Aethermatic blue contrast for the main body of the coils, Kroxigor scales around the outer rims, and then I went back in with the white ink on the tops of the coils to give it a glow from the top center of the coil. And this got us pretty close to our GW heavy metal style glow. Approaching the finish line here, I'm going to be using Fire Slayer Flesh mixed with some water diluted right on the bases. I really like using contrast paints for primary colors on the bases of miniatures, regardless of what it is. This Fire Slayer is always a good soil color in my opinion, and I water it down so that you get darkness down towards the bottom of the base, but the water helps the contrast to run off of the upper grains and pebbles, leaving them only slightly stained so that you can come in with a dry brush if you want later and it still keeps a good tone. Last things that we need to do are some of the details that haven't been touched already. That's going to be the leather belts and pouches, as well as the tabards on the front of the sergeants, as well as the sergeants' tactical rocks that they're standing on. For all of these, I'm going to be doing a base coat of bright neutral gray again, doing a quick chunky value sketch that we can then put washes and contrasts on after the fact. We're just trying to go quick, give the contrasts a nice value sketch to go over, and then let that be done. Once that base coat is in place, I'm going to be doing all of the leather with Garrigach Sewer. These are all the belts and pouches. For the tactical rocks, I put a mixture of Griff Charger Gray and Basilicanum Gray in 50-50 mix. You could lean more into the Griff Charger Gray if you wanted a cooler stone, but I felt that the 50-50 mix was fine and gave us a nice slate result. We only have 2 tabards and they could use just a single layer real quick, and so I'm going to be adding some Bold Titanium White, just going and hitting all the raised areas, any of the upper ridges and upper facing stretches of these tabards. I'm just doing a quick blocky sketch. Might do a little bit of wet blending just to make sure that it's not too chunky, but other than that, this is all we're going to do for the tabards, and this gets them looking nice and pale. Reaching the end here, I thought that the bases could use some greenery to help break up just that solid brown. However, I don't have very many good low grass tufts at the moment or flock. However, I do have this dirty down moss that I thought might be good to just spread real quick across some of these bases in a random spattering pattern, get some on the tactical rocks of the sergeants, just to break up all that brown, harken some green and connect it to the green of the tassels that's on other parts of the miniatures here and give them a little more life for low effort cost. After that, I'm just going to be using this black brown from Pro Acryl to paint the base rims in a nice dark chocolate brown, and we are approaching the end of our painting process here. And now to reveal the finished minis. And just look at these guys. That pink is popping. We've got good glow on the plasma. We've got nice subtle black. All the iron is looking nice and grim. I really am happy with how these turned out for the amount of time that was put into them. There were lessons learned, of course, and things that I would love to try again in the future when I get my hands on more of these, but I'm hoping that these will go to a very happy customer soon. If you would like your Emperor's Children painted in a way similar to this, or in a completely different scheme of your own design, reach out to us at gospelstudios@gmail.com, or you can PM me on any of the social media, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, or Facebook. You can also check out our website, Merchants of Wargaming. There you'll be able to see all the miniatures that are already painted up and ready to go. Well, that's it for today, guys. I hope you found this helpful, and we'll see you in the next video.